Hello.
So this is an interview with Dr. Sharon Cooper Brooks. The first question is, what is your professional job title?
I'm a developmental and forensic pediatrician.
A developmental forensic pediatrician?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Next question.
Yes.
What city and state did you grow up in?
I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia.
Question number 3.
Mm-hmm.
What is the name and location of your high school?
I went to Notre Dame High School in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Greensboro?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Greensboro, North Carolina.
Next question. What is the name and location of the college you attended?
I went to Fisk University.
How do you spell that?
Capital F-I-S-K. Fisk University, and that's in Nashville, Tennessee.
What was your major in college?
My major was biology.
What is your degree beyond college?
I got a doctorate in medicine degree.
Where did you attend medical school?
I went to Meharry Medical College. That's spelled capital M-E-H-A-R-R-Y. Medical College.
And where exactly is Meharry Medical College?
It's also in Nashville, Tennessee.
What education is required as a forensic pediatrician?
Well, we have to do an internship and a residency in pediatrics, and then we have to have a significant amount of additional training in the areas of child maltreatment and the law.
Could you repeat that one more time?
I can.
Okay. Could you repeat that one more time?
Yes. So you have to have 3 years of pediatric training, and then when you finish your pediatric training, you have to have a significant amount of additional hours of training in the area of child abuse.
Okay. How much work experience do you have as a forensic pediatrician?
I've been working as a forensic pediatrician for about 34 years.
How long did you serve in the military, if you had a military career?
I did have a military career, and I served in the military for 21 years.
And what branch were you in?
I was in the United States Army.
Do you have to travel to perform your job?
I do have to travel quite a bit, in fact.
How much travel do you do?
I would say probably at least 30% of my time is spent traveling.
Locally or?
No, in and around the United States and sometimes outside of the United States.
What are some of the places you have traveled?
Well, recently I just returned from the Netherlands, where I was doing a training for Interpol, the International Police. And I also just got back recently from Bermuda, where I was speaking at a conference for an organization called INHOPE, one word, I-N-H-O-P-E. INHOPE is an international organization that certifies all cyber tip lines. So if a person wants to make a report online of some type of criminal action that they see happening on the internet, they go to a cyber tip line, just like you would call 911 on the telephone in order to make a 911 call online. It's called a cyber tip line. So there are 40 cyber tip lines in the world, and they invited me to come to do a training for them in Bermuda last month.
Interesting. Is traveling a benefit or an added stress?
Well, it can be stressful, definitely, but I think that it's beneficial because you get a chance to meet a lot of people when you travel. And although I am a professional trainer and I teach a lot of different types of people, law enforcement officers, attorneys, prosecutors, social workers, child protective services workers. In addition, though, I also gain because I don't just go and teach and leave. A lot of times I try to stay and hear what other people are teaching, and that gives me significantly more opportunity to understand the scope of what I'm trying to prevent.
What were some of the most memorable professional rewards during your travels?
During my travels, I guess one of the most memorable was when I was invited to testify before the Russian parliament. That was very memorable because very rarely do Americans get to go and testify in Moscow. So that was really very memorable. But also, I would say traveling in the United States, I felt very honored to be invited to testify before our own Congress. So that was a different travel, but it was very exciting to go and testify before the Congress of the United States.
Okay. What has been the most interesting event on your job most recently, like last 90 days?
Probably the most recent and memorable event that I have experienced is working on a documentary. I'm working on a documentary with some professional filmmakers, and we are trying to help people understand how significant victimization is for children who have images, where there are images of children on the internet. So we have been traveling around the country interviewing people, both here as well as outside of the country, on their experiences about that. In particular, parents of children whose images are on the internet, we've interviewed as well. So that's been very, it's not so much inspirational, but it's very thought-provoking. That would be the better word, thought-provoking, because I'm the one who has to interview all of these people, and I want to be able to ask them questions that are not hurtful to them, but will allow other people to understand how significantly traumatic it is for a child to know that their images are on the internet.
What is a typical day for you?
A typical day? Okay, well, a typical day, I do see patients, and so a typical day, I'm up around 5:30, and I go into my clinic, and most of the time I'm seeing my developmental patients because there's a big demand for children who have developmental problems to be able to have medical care. So that will take me usually the entire day up until about 4:30 in the afternoon, at which time I then begin to write the reports because their evaluations require a lot of documentation. I review school records. I look at other outside evaluations like brain MRIs of some of these children and make recommendations about medication management or educational assistance for them or other types of diagnostic things that they need to have done. That's a typical developmental clinic day. But a typical child abuse day is likely to occur when I go to work perhaps at my clinic and I get an email or a call from a social worker, often from a social worker because a child is in the emergency room who has some injuries that they're concerned about, or a child has been admitted to the hospital and they have concerns that this child is either non-accidentally injured or is in the hospital because they're not gaining weight as an infant, and the concern is that the parent might be neglecting the child.
How many hours do you work in a week?
Probably about 70 hours a week, I would say, because I work 10 hours a day typically in my clinic, and then I might come home and work another 2 or 4 more hours during the course of the day because I have a lot of work to do, unfortunately.
What do you like and dislike about your job?
What do I like and dislike? What I like about my job is that I really like to see justice done, and I like to see children have the opportunity to grow up in a safe and nurturing environment. So whatever I can do to make sure a child is going to be safe, I'm really happy to be part of that process. What I don't like about my job is that I don't have enough time to maybe do all the things that I would like to do. I get a lot of requests to do training for various organizations, and I have to turn down a lot of them. In fact, I was just teaching 3 days ago in Cape Cod, and when I got up to speak, I was the keynote speaker, and when I got up to speak, the woman who introduced me said, "We have been trying to get Dr. Cooper here for 4 years. And so now we're finally glad that she's here to be our keynote speaker." That makes me feel badly, because I feel like, oh my God, I'm not that important, really. But it is true, it's hard. There are a lot of people who want to have trainers for their conferences, and I'm just one of those people that I get requests, and I could probably just do that and not see patients, but that's not what I desire to do.
Have you seen a relationship between stress and the increase in your salary over the year?
In the increase in my salary, no. I would say it does not increase. I would say that you have to really manage stress, because stress can take over your life very easily. So the word that I would use, Misha, is pragmatic. A person has to be pragmatic about the demands upon them and recognize that you can only do what you can do. So not to get too stressed out if you can't do what other people want you to do. For example, this week it was requested that I come to Chicago to testify in a court case, and they wanted me to come this afternoon on Sunday afternoon, when the court case I was not really going to start testifying until Tuesday, and I already have another court case set up to testify in tomorrow. So I knew it was not going to be possible for me to go to Chicago and just skip out on the other case that I have to testify in. So I could get stressed when people say, "This is what we need, and we're making your airline reservations right now." I could get stressed about things like that, but I don't get stressed because I already know it's not going to happen like that. So, but it takes, confidence and a sense of serenity to a certain extent to just recognize that you can only do what you can do.
What would you say was your beginning salary starting as a forensic pediatrician?
My beginning salary when I first started as a pediatrician was around probably $28,000, because I came in as a captain in the Army and I was an intern. And interns and residents, you make your salaries based upon your rank. So the higher your rank becomes. And in the medical corps in the military, fortunately, you gain rank pretty quickly as compared to other branches of the military, other areas of the military. So I think I was a captain for 5 years, and then I became a major, and your income increases with your rank. So the higher your rank, the higher your income.
So what would you say your salary is now?
I would say my salary now varies, but most pediatricians make about maybe $80,000, $90,000 a year. That's a pediatrician who's in a good situation. On the other hand, other types of doctors make much higher salaries because they are working in hospitals, operating on patients, for example. So they might get a much higher salary. Pediatricians are the lowest paid of all physicians. So therefore, obviously, I don't do this for the money. Or else I would have done something else.
Oh, okay. Let's see. What would you do differently or the same regarding your career?
Probably I would have, I don't think I would do very much differently. Maybe I would have started writing earlier in my career. I started writing in about 2000, and 2, and I published my first book in 2005, and I published a second book in 2007, and I published chapters in other people's books, but we just finished a third book, just this month. In fact, it went to a publisher this month, and the name of it is Perspectives on Missing Persons Cases. So, and that book is now going to the printers, and I'm already in discussion for a fourth book that I'm going to be working on sometime soon. So I think I would have started writing earlier. And I think I would have liked to have had more English. Because when you have to write, it really helps if you have more training in writing so that you sound like you know what you're talking about. Instead of doctors write in a very abbreviated manner. You know, our medical reports are kind of bulleted. So when you write like that all the time in your job, it's a big change for you to write like you're going to write in a book. Because then you have to be more grammatically correct, and you also have to put adjectives and adverbs in the right place, all that kind of stuff. So I would have to say that I would have liked to have started writing earlier.
How do you balance writing a book and your job?
Yeah, that's a challenge. The first book that I wrote, I would start writing about, I would come home from work and I would kind of be tired, so I would go to bed early, like about maybe 9, and I would get up about 3, and I would write from 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 in the morning, and then I would go to work again, because I recognized that I couldn't write if I was too tired. But on the weekends, I would probably be at my computer for 12 hours a day easily, writing and researching.
Now, I've heard you've been on some TV shows.
I have.
Well, could you tell me about that?
Yes, let's see. I think the first television program I was ever on was, that's funny. I can't remember the first television program I was on, but I've been on Anderson Cooper 360. And you know, he's a television news journalist, and he interviewed me regarding the circumstances of a child who had been rescued after he had been kidnapped and had been kept for 4 years by the kidnapper, and then was finally recovered. And so he called to talk to me. But he called me and asked me to interview me on his television program, so I did. And then, you know, when you testify before Congress, that's on television as well. The channel that it's on is C-SPAN. That's all congressional testimony. I also have been on the Dr. Phil show, and most recently I was on Lifetime TV in a discussion of the Ariel Castro case out of Cleveland, Ohio. So those have been the primary things that I've done on television.
Could you expand on the Ariel Castro case?
Yes, that was an NBC interview. So NBC contacted me and said, you know, we'd like to interview you. Where can we meet you? And I said, well, let's meet. I live in North Carolina, so they asked me I was going to be going to Washington to speak at a conference. So they flew down from New York and came and interviewed me in Washington, D.C. for several hours, 4 hours. And the journalist had figured out all the things that he wanted to ask me. And they were really about the victims in the Ariel Castro case, Gina DeJesus, Amanda Berry, and Michelle Knight, and the kind of maltreatment that they experienced. Michelle Knight, of course, was abused the most severely because, number one, she was Ariel Castro's first victim, whom he kidnapped after she left a Burger King restaurant. Number two, she was the most victimized person because he thought she was a teenager, but she was not. She was 22 years old when he took her. But because she was 4'2", because she was so short, he thought she was a teenager. And once he discovered that he was not a teenager, he was furious. And the whole rest of the time that he had control over her, he was very, very abusive to her. He was absolutely a torturer. Most of the time, he kept all three of these women and girls chained, and they couldn't leave. Michelle Knight did not get to leave the house that she was in for 11 years.
How did they escape?
What happened was that finally he had left one of the doors unlocked. it wasn't completely unlocked. It was a locked screen door that you couldn't get out of, and it was also barricaded. But the door, the wooden door part of it, wasn't completely locked. And so one of the three girls, young ladies by that time, because the other two victims were 14 and 16 years old when he abducted them. One of them tried the door and realized that she could at least kick out the glass of the screen door that was outside the wooden door, and began screaming and hollering for help. And so that's how they got rescued.
Oh. So, that was a very interesting story.
It is.
Have you, well, I heard that you're making a documentary.
I am, yes.
And what is that documentary about?
I'm making a documentary along with a film crew, and it's going to be called Not Just Pictures. And it's about children who've been exploited in cyberspace, where people have made sexually suggestive pictures of them and have traded them on the internet. And the purpose of this documentary is to help people understand that these pictures make a child's life so much worse, because once pictures of a child are out there, you cannot get them back. And so very often children will be very anxious for the rest of their lives. And they also have paranoia. They're fearful all the time that people have seen them or people will see them. Many victims will go to a party at 16 or 17 years of age, and if they walk into the party and kids are playing video games on a computer, they will often leave because they just have this fear that images are going to just pop up on the computer. So my experience with these types of patients is that most people do not understand how frightening it is for a child. So we're making a documentary about that.
And what is it called?
Not Just Pictures.
I think you already said that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No,
I'm
good.
sorry.
No. I said it so much, I think it's easy to see why you wouldn't remember that.
Are you active in your local community or nonprofit events?
I am. I'm involved with my church. I'm a Sunday school teacher. I've been teaching Sunday school for 29 years, and I teach 4th through 6th graders. And so they keep me on my toes. I'm very grateful to teach young children. And then I'm also a musician, so I've been playing the organ for churches since I was 12. And so I've been playing the organ for the church that I belong to now this is my 21st year playing the organ for that church. And so I really do enjoy that. I love playing the piano and the organ.
Let's see.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was one other nonprofit, 2 other nonprofit organizations that I participate with. One is our local Rape Crisis Center here in the community, so I'm on their board of directors and work with them. And then I'm on the board of directors of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. That's a national nonprofit organization that specializes in missing children. Whenever children go missing, they're the people who put out the wanted posters, that describes a child who's missing. That's why we wrote this book on missing persons. But they also are the cyber tip line for the United States. So, that hotline that people can call if they see something online that's very concerning to them. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is that organization. So I've been on their board for about 13 years now. And I find it to be a very excellent board. It's a very diverse organization. They do a lot of very good things.
Now, for this last 24 minutes, I've been listening to you, and you sound pretty busy. And all through this interview, I was wondering, how do you find time for your family and friends?
That's a very good question. Well, you have to really carve out time, because I have a husband, I have a son who's a PhD student, and I have a 90-year-old mother who does not yet live with me, but who I have to, keep tabs of. She lives not that far away. So I'm on the phone often to everybody, checking in with them. I try to go and I see my son and my mother every week so that I can just make sure everything's going okay. For example, I was just getting ready to go to a meeting in the middle of the week, and I knew I wasn't going to get to go see my mother on the day I normally do, and she would become confused if I didn't show up. So I had to do a whole bunch of stuff. So I went to bed, and I got up at 4:30 in the morning, and I drove up to see my mother. I took breakfast to her, and I was there for 20 minutes, and then I left and came back and got a plane. But sometimes that's what you have to do in order to stay in touch. But I email and text and, try to stay in touch with everyone so that they know I'm around.
Oh, okay. Now, for the last question. Do you have any additional thoughts?
Well, one of the things that I do think about, Misha, is the education of children in America. I am very concerned about the fact that our country has fallen and fallen and fallen with respect to the competitiveness as far as academics are concerned in our children. Very concerned about why that is the case. And one of the things I really try to do in a starfish fashion, I'll explain that in a second, is try to talk to parents individually about things that they can do to help their children do better in school. A lot of our children have a lot of distractions in their lives these days. And that's one of the things that can interfere with their being able to successfully go to school. And particularly minority children have the greatest number of distractions because the research has shown that minority children, for example, access more media than any other race of children in the United States. And the more media that you are accessing, such as watching TV all the time or listening to the radio or listening to whatever all the time, is time taken away from being able to pursue your academics. And it is important to pursue your academics. So I'm very eager to try to make a difference first with my patient families by talking to my families. I often talk to my families of toddlers that they need to turn everything off in the house as far as media is concerned during the course of the day, unless they really have to look at something, because the research has shown that if you have television on all the time as background noise, it causes children between the ages of 15 months and 3 or 4 to have speech and language delay because they're getting too much auditory stimulation. It's not quiet enough for them to hear the words that a person is speaking to them, understand what those words mean, and speak back. And it's amazing how I have to actually walk many of my parents through that discussion. They don't get that. So I have it in writing, hand out things to them, and try to explain to them. The other thing I have to tell my parents all the time is that the most important thing they can do is to read to their children. And you'd be surprised how many parents never read to their children. They just turn on a DVD and assume that that's going to make their children learn. And that does not make children learn. So, and those are not old-fashioned tenets. Those are, in fact, very recent and, once again, reaffirming practices as we look at the behaviors of families in other countries where children are achieving at a much higher academic level than they are in our country. And some of the things that I'm talking about, reading to children, talking to them about current events, spending a lot of verbal time, makes a huge difference in a child's ability to comprehend, process, and learn. So that's one of the things I'd really like to see change, and I want to be the one person who throws that one starfish family back into the sea so they'll survive and their children will do better. Does that make sense?
Okay, now I lied.
Okay.
So there's actually one more question.
Yes. I brought it upon myself, I'm sure.
Did I forget? No, I didn't forget.
Okay.
How long have you wanted this career? Like, did it just come upon you in college, oh, I want this career, or is it a lifelong dream?
No. In fact, my forensic career I gained kicking and screaming, believe me. I did not want to be a forensic pediatrician. I was like, no, because when you get on the witness stand, people will berate you and be very mean to you. And physicians generally do not like that. So, we're really accustomed to working together with people. But it took a while for me to finally decide that I needed to be a catalyst for what is right. And there's hardly a case that's going to end up going to a court system where something bad has not happened, especially in child abuse. Something bad has happened. And we have to determine whether or not it was accidental or intentional, and we have to determine whether or not somebody made it easier for it to be an intentional injury to a child. So it took a while for me to finally decide, I guess I better try to get better at this, because it was not good. And I teach other doctors, for example, how to testify in court cases involving child abuse. And one of the things that I always tell them is that when there is a court case involving child abuse, there will always be some weak link in that court case. Just don't let it be you. If there's a weak link, don't let it be you. Let it be somebody else, but not you. So that's one of my mantras, and that's one of the things I try really hard to encourage other physicians who are learning how to evaluate and diagnose and testify in court cases regarding child abuse to do.
Now, I promise I'm going to try to make this the last question because I know you're very busy. But are you one of the people who investigate crime scenes, or do you just get the reports from crime scenes?
Well, actually, sometimes I am asked to look at crime scenes. Many times, the crime scene that I investigate is the child's body. Many times, the children are brought into the emergency room injured, and that is the crime scene. Their body is the crime scene. And I might look at the kinds of injuries that this child has, and I can tell law enforcement this is not an accident. I can tell right away that it's not an accident, even though the people bringing the child in will say, oh, it was a terrible accident, and this is what happened. And they give you this nice, long, convoluted explanation as how the child has the injuries that they do. And I listen carefully, and I look very carefully. And my crime scene investigation is on the child's body, and I can usually tell the law enforcement officers or whoever's investigating that this is a crime scene as compared to the scene of an accident. And especially when I'm looking at images on the internet, those are digital crime scenes. And I frequently have to investigate and review those kinds of images and tell law enforcement whether or not they in fact constitute a crime. So yes, I do in fact look to crime scenes.
Are they dead or very heavily injured?
Some of the children are very heavily injured. Some of them do come in as, they may come in alive and then they expire in the emergency room. That can happen. Or they may come into the hospital very injured and expire somewhere else in the hospital, such as in the operating room or something like that. For images that are on the internet, almost the overwhelming majority of those children are alive. And what you're seeing in real time are videos of those children being abused. And we can definitely make it very clear that those are inflicted injuries that are happening to children in that situation.
Okay, now I promise this is the last question.
If I were to answer just yes or no, it would be. I'll try to answer yes or no, but probably won't. Yes.
Have you ever cried on the job?
Heavens, yes. Oh my gosh, yes, because some of these children, they just go through such really terrible things. And it's very hard for me. I'm not the kind of person who's a rock. I mean, I can be a rock in the right place, but when a mother is crying in front of me and telling me how wounded she is, that her child is so injured or her child has died, it's very hard. It's just about impossible for me to just stand there like a rock and just not feel her pain. I am a very empathetic person in that sense. So, yes, I have.
Okay, I'm going to keep to my word. I'm bursting with questions right now, but we're running out of time. So, thank you for your time.
You are very welcome and very disciplined. You are a great interviewer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.